It's a timely exercise whereby we are engaging the Federation in an audit tool. Think of it as an assessment. Think of it as feedback, critical feedback to this process. And it is a way to engage our key stakeholders on the Twin Islands, or in the Twin Islands. So the Federation has embraced it. Nima, as well as NDMD from Nevis, has embraced this process, and we are looking forward to listen to our stakeholders and to have a dynamic event and project.
Okay. Well, as she just mentioned, both agencies here in the Federation has embraced this project. Mrs. Langley-Stevens, I will start with you. How has Nima really embraced this audit tool?
Thank you, Kailani. Over the last 6 years, St. Kitts and Nevis would have engaged in the CDM, the Comprehensive Disaster Management mandate. This exercise took place a few years ago here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we recognize the value of it as it relates to enhancing our own capabilities at the National Disaster Offices, but also in our country work programs, where we are expected to outline some of the accomplishments, the legislation, the projects, and anything that would help to get disaster management on the road to resilience, where we're making our Twin Island Federation a more resilient state. And we recognize that there are some challenges and there are some gaps. And without the use of the tool, and the tool is basically a series of questions specific to different sectors, different departments, different stakeholders that support disaster management in both St. Kitts and Nevis, that could help us to be able to firstly identify the gaps and then be able to put mechanisms in place to fill these gaps, even if it's just through training, education, and awareness, or just looking at the capacity of the national disaster offices.
Great, thanks. Mr. Dyer, from your standpoint, how important is this for your department?
As Ms. Stevens and Ms. Murray indicated, it's a chance for us to look internally at our systems and procedures, and to also engage our stakeholders, because over the years we have been impacted by several hazards, and it's a chance now to look at what we had in place and how effective it was, and also to engage our internal staff in capacity building as well. And across the region, several states were impacted, and because of the intervention of the international agencies, we found that some of the operations in country were a bit short. So it's a chance now for us to leverage the recommendations and best practices from some of these countries to see how it can enhance the operations here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Okay, great. So it's not an indictment on Nima or your department that, you know, we're not up to standard?
No, not necessarily.
Okay,
no.
great. Okay, so what exactly takes place during this audit exercise?
Yeah. Sure. So I will take you through a few paces. We have some questionnaires in which we have to answer. We have specific questions, and they fall into the area of recovery, mitigation, response, and preparedness, right? So like you mentioned, Mr. Johnson, no, it's not an indictment on our hardworking disaster management professionals. Rather, it's a time for them to take stock. It's a time for them to see where they are, where they want to be, or where they are right now, and where they are going. So the questions would be answered by all stakeholders and internally from the disaster management organization, so everybody gets a complete picture, right? So you're really asking, Mr. Johnson, how is our response times? How is our recovery times? What does preparedness look like for us? All right, mitigation, what kind of mitigation efforts are out there? So it's really an exciting time, and I believe that You know, this is not something that's forced onto our disaster management organizations, but it's simultaneously, I know in Haiti as well as the Bahamas, the same sort of exercise is going on where we're working hand in hand with the country.
You mentioned stakeholders. Who are some of these stakeholders who will be participating in this exercise?
Good. Our stakeholders, and Mr. Dyer, Ms. Stevens can comment some more, but I'm really excited to know that the disaster management organizations have reached out to those stakeholders in the public sector, the private sector, the NGO community, and faith-based organizations, and even the community organizations, you know, at the community level, the committees, the councils. So we have a broad umbrella, so to speak, you know, with these stakeholders.
For us, disaster management is not the persons at the office. It's not a building. Mm-hmm. It's an all-government approach. Right. So we have to interact with the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, the faith-based organizations, the government agencies themselves. We have force responding agencies. We have agencies that deal with the policy development. And we also have volunteers, a critical part of the disaster management response. We also have the subcommittees that comprise of other agencies and organizations, the non-government organizations, etc., etc. So we want to bring all these persons together and have them go through the questionnaire and break it down in sector by sector. Right. As the disaster management framework encompasses what we call disaster management cycle, which has 4 broad areas. Mitigation, where we try to minimize the impact and identify our hazards. The preparedness phase is where we actually, you develop your maps and you enhance your public education awareness. Then we have the response phase, which is about 2 weeks after any impact, where we try to stop the bleeding, we try to minimize the damage that has already occurred. And at the end of that 2 weeks, we try to jumpstart the recovery process, jumpstart the economy, so persons can feel a sense of normalcy as soon as practical after the impact. So we want to take our stakeholders through that chain or to that circle and ensure that they can answer some of the questions and identify where we need assistance and where we need to enhance, or maybe we need to change 1 or 2 things to ensure that we come up with the best scenario for sinks and nevis.
Mr. Stevens, you comfortable with that answer? You have something? You can add something.
I think I just want to summarize by saying that our disaster management stakeholders are not only being brought in just now because we're conducting an audit. Right. Our stakeholders are constantly being engaged by Nima. Right. For example, when you look at the National Mitigation Council, it's made up of decision makers from across government and the private sector. But in addition to that, one of the things that we pride ourselves on in this particular exercise to maximize the benefits of it is to include decision makers as well as the first responders at the community level. And as recent as last evening, Ms. Murray and the team from Nima, we were actually engaged in a discussion with the Nima district managers and assistant managers as well as the youth ambassadors. And this was preceded by a discussion amongst both staff of NDMD and Nima, where we were engaged. We got a taste of what the stakeholders are going to be going through. And I was just discussing with Brian that it was an extremely useful exercise. I can't tell you, I mean, I've been in disaster management for quite a while, and there were some things that were discovered just answering some basic questions that we were able to identify some gaps. And I'm saying, if we're using just the staff and we're gaining so much value, can you imagine when we go to the stakeholders, some who have working knowledge of disaster management cycle, and some who are novice. They have no idea what happens within our 4 walls as a disaster institution. So I think that the exercise and the stakeholders Like Brian said, it's a multi-sectoral approach, and I think that is going to give us the type of results. Not everybody will agree, but like Ms. Murray likes to say, we are going to get all of the answers, and then we will find commonality, and that would point us in the right direction to be able to gain access to the resources and assistance required to move us to the next level.
How has this been received by some of these stakeholders that you guys have spoken to so far? How have they responded to the news of this audit and the participation in it?
You know, funny you should ask that, because I had to send a very detailed message to Ms. Murray last evening and say thank you so much, because we have meetings with our district volunteers all the time, but it was so engaging because they are now understanding that disaster management is not Claricia, and it's not Brian, and it's not Abdias. It's everybody has a role to play, but it is at what stage of the cycle, you know, do you become critical? And we value everybody at all stages. The thing that came out for us is that we haven't had a lot of practice in the recovery stage. So we know we have work to do at the recovery stage, but mitigation and preparedness, we are on point. And so we now have to look at response, because anything can happen to us. It's how quickly we're able to bounce back in terms of recovering. And so there's a lot to learn, and I really do hope that persons are open-minded and avail themselves to be exposed to whatever Ms. Murray has to share and to partner with us on this venture, very important venture.
Ms. Murray, you have years of experience in this field, in these endeavors. As she just mentioned, she's hoping that our stakeholders here will come with open minds and hearts to take this information. Without going in too much detail, what are some of the things you hope to impart to some of the participants during this process?
Right, that's a very, very good and timely question, excellent question. I hope at the end of this process, what I hope would be imparted would be the disaster management organizations would, one, see themselves as being so vitally important to all stakeholders, down to the community level, right? To see themselves as that you know, you have a middle part of a wheel, and the wheel turns around. So the disaster management organizations is that middle wheel. I also hope that when it comes to areas like evidence-based methodology or results management, you know, these are things that, you know, as we partner over the past month together, these were areas that came up to the fore in terms of, you know, our interaction, getting better at interacting with stakeholders. And I hope too that, you know, before I leave, I can do some capacity building with the NDMOs so that I can leave them with some areas, some things to think about, some ways to improve, because all across the Caribbean, Mr. Johnson, we need continuous capacity building so that we can reach wherever our stakeholders are, whether in the market, the marketplace, the business environment, in the media, in the high schools, in the primaries, in the nursery, okay? All over will be touched. So those evidence-based methodologies, those are results management type things, leadership skills, right? And I want to say, Mr. Johnson, we need more volunteers, right? I'm a volunteer. I love volunteering. So we need more volunteers in the disaster management area, because as you know, Mr. Johnson, we have our seniors in the community. We have women with babies and children, single mothers. Somebody needs a helping hand. So we should not wait until disaster strikes. And finally, Mr. Johnson, this audit tool, as I've been saying, is really about saving lives. It's life or death. right? It's about saving a life out there, which is precious to the Federation, right? I know you value your people. I know there's a strong Christian base here. So we value people in the Caribbean. So we want to send a message loud and clear that we need people to buy in to this. We saw what happened in St. Vincent. We saw what happened in parts of South America, all over Barbados, flooding. People lost, their basic necessities, right? So we want to really ask that John Public or Jane Public out there, you come on board as a volunteer. You stay alert. You be a stakeholder, right? Everybody's a stakeholder. Engage Nima, engage NDMD, so that we can always see how it is that we can improve for the benefit of you, working for you. We got to work for you.
That's great. And she touched on a very important aspect, volunteering. How do NEMA and, of course, the NDMD, how do you guys go about encouraging persons to come on board, be volunteers, that this is a worthwhile effort for them to be involved in?
Well, attracting volunteer is one thing, but maintaining the volunteer core is another. We have done a wide plethora of initiatives to attract persons to disaster management. We have a robust public education awareness campaign. We go around to the communities to have discussions. Right. We engage the churches, we engage the schools, and have the schools also interact with the communities and also the business places. And we have a lot of training programs as well. So we invite persons to take part in the training programs, and then from that invitation, we then look at the specialization of the persons coming on board. Because some persons are have training in force response, some may have it in psychosocial training, some may just be a driver or cook that can function in some shelter or community-based areas. So we have to find a way of attracting these skills and maintaining these skills. Unfortunately, in St. Kitts and Nevis, there is no volunteer or volunteerism legislation, as some of the volunteers may have to be away from their traditional jobs for an extended period of time. So who would take care of that individual's family in the event they have to be away for an extended period of time if they're not working for the civil service proper? We have also some volunteers from the Spanish community. We have to ensure that those persons are taken care of. What happens if an individual may be injured? Who will take care of those bills? So we have to look long term, and we hope that this is one of the areas that is addressed in the audit, that it is time the policymakers come up with legislation to address volunteer and volunteerism. Because if someone has a passion for a volunteer and volunteerism, and their family need to be taken care of and is not, then they would tend to go where the priority is. So in that case, we may lose a critical person. So we have to ensure that once the volunteer come on board, we can keep those services. And by that person being active and happy, then we can attract more, because they will be a prime example of the experiences. Right? So.
Okay. So,
day to be a volunteer. Yes. I want to say that again. Every day is a good day to be a volunteer. There is this challenge that we're facing, though, that volunteerism seems to be dying in terms of the value, because when you ask persons to volunteer, the next question or the next appropriate question is, what's in it for me? Right. And it's unfortunate, because if you understand what volunteerism is, that would not even be a part of the conversation of volunteerism. One of the things that the agency has sought to do of recent times is that we have, at the start of the year, we are constantly recruiting for volunteers. But at the start of the year, we host what you call a volunteers orientation. And in that session, we are deliberate with ensuring that the persons who are showing interest understand what volunteering for disaster management emergency response looks like. Because some people are limited to the idea that we're going out there in heavy rains and muddy puddles and, you know, dangerous situations. But that's just one aspect. That's the first responders with the appropriate training and resources to do that. That's one aspect of volunteerism. Here's the other aspect. You tell us what you are good at, and we look at our model and we see how can we utilize your skill set, your knowledge, your capabilities, your background, your patience, yeah, and your resources. Because if you have a backer or your big truck, it's a part of the volunteerism. You're giving of your time and your effort and your energies to be able to help disaster to accomplish its goals. So for us, it's like we prefer to expose you so that you understand. Even a babysitter, we bring in the staff to work at Nima, they have to be there for extended period of time. You have to bring your family come. We have somebody who has that background in dealing with children, and we'll just put you to deal with that, provide you with the resources, and we're off, so that the staff can focus on what they're doing. But you are bringing your skill to the table. So we want persons to look at the bigger picture of volunteerism. And I think if we are able to do that and put the necessary legislation in place to support volunteerism or the power of volunteerism, and of course speak about the benefits of volunteerism, because you could come to us as a blank sheet of paper as a volunteer. By the time we're finished with you, you're certified in this and you're certified in that, and you know, a whole set of things go on, because it's a hand go, hand come situation. You help us, we empower you, we give you the necessary exposure so that we can utilize you to be able to move what we're doing to the next level. And of course, it's a win-win for everybody. Yeah. And of course, I like to remind people that we still have that thing that says country above self. So
I think we should have ended by just how you started. Every day is
a good day to be a volunteer.
That's right. Okay, so Friday, March 4th, you guys have a big event planned. Can someone tell me about what will be happening on Friday? Of course.
There you go, Thursday. Thank you.
On Thursday, which is tomorrow, the News Disaster Management Department will engage its stakeholders, exposing them to the audit tool. We would have some presentations providing an overview, and then we'll have Ms. Murray guide the stakeholders through the questionnaire. The questionnaire, as Ms. Murray indicated, is broken down into 4 main areas: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So there are a series of questions in each category, and we will have group sessions as some of the stakeholders, because of their specific roles in these particular areas, would have a chance to dialogue and to ensure that they have some synergy with regards to their responses. At the end of the presentation by Ms. Murray and the going through the tool, then the following week we would have these stakeholders now in one-on-one sessions where we can explain to them in more detail, and we can find out from them if they had any challenges while they were going through the tool, and what their response is or were, and why they came up with that response. And in that regard, we will be able to harness this information, and at the end of it, we hope to compile enough information so we can start the process for our country work program. That is Singles and Nevis, because we need to chart the way forward for the next 5 to 10 years. So we have a common work program across the Federation.
Okay. Well, before we move on, let's stay with Nevis a bit. Mrs. Langley Stevens, she spoke of how enthusiastic the stakeholders here are. I didn't think you got a chance to say how you guys on our sister island are feeling about this exercise.
Well, we had to engage first of all, we identified some focal points where they had several discussions with and meetings with Ms. Murray, where they look at the questionnaire, and we had to tailor the questionnaire specifically to the operations here on Nevis and St. Kitts. With regards to the stakeholders, we had a chance to engage stakeholders one-on-one, in letting them know the reasons for the audit, the importance of their role in the disaster management framework, and they are enthusiastic as well. We had, apart from the phone calls, we followed up the phone call with a letter, and we have already had several responses. So it's just to finalize and have them show up tomorrow. But we anticipate that it would be a good turnout, because the disaster management framework is comprised of permanent secretaries, heads of department, the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, the NGOs, and our volunteer and members from the subcommittees in the disaster management framework. So we'll all have a good turnout tomorrow, and we'll be supported also by a contingent from the National Emergency Management Agency. So, and again, the minister...
So it's good when you have the level from the top.
Once you have the policy level right down, we should be all right. So, yeah.
Okay, so that's the Thursday.
Yes, that's tomorrow, okay. Thursday, yes.
And Friday.
Say everything Brian said Friday, but I won't. The National Emergency Management Agency is very pleased to be partnering with the Marriott, and we are going to be engaging our stakeholders on Friday from 9:30, and we run up until midday. And very similar to what's happening on Nevis, is actually the same program that we're looking at in terms of exposing the stakeholders, our invitees, to a wide cross-section of information, but the highlight of the stakeholders meeting is to be introduced to the tool. The objectives of the tool, the expected outcomes of the tool, their own roles and responsibilities as representatives from particular institutions, organizations, as well as what we can look forward to as an end product from that tool. I believe very similar. We are going to have representation from both chairs of the National Mitigation Council, the Honorable Vincent Byron Jr., as well as the Honorable Wendy Phipps. And the program will be chaired by National Disaster Coordinator, Mr. Abdia Samuel, and we'll have the other focal points making their presentation. And so we get to have Brian in St. Kitts twice in a row. We are happy for that because Brian is going to come down to be able to participate in our own, and we are going up, so we'll learn, you know, some of best practices, what could occur at their meeting when we come down on Friday. And so we are very happy. We're hoping to have YouTube streaming of the event, but it will be recorded so that persons can access the information. And of course, the lady of the hour will be Denise Murray. And I really want to use the opportunity publicly to thank the Marriott for partnering with Nima on this very important exercise, and all of our stakeholders who would have indicated very early their interest in participating, because without the stakeholders, the exercise would not, you know, meet the requirements, and so we can't do it on our own. This is and every individual playing their part to be able to ensure that when Ms. Murray writes that final report, it reflects the good, the bad, and the indifferent, so that we can work on those areas and strengthen where we can, eliminate what needs to be eliminated, or just implement new measures to get us forward. So we're really looking forward to the 2 days, tomorrow on Nevis and on Friday here in St. Kitts.
Okay, but you mentioned the 2 days, but does the audit last just the 2 days, or is it an ongoing process?
Well, it's going to be an ongoing process up until April, May. Yes, because we have to validate the information, look at it critically. We say not really sanitizing, but we want to ensure that we captured exactly what our stakeholders told us, what we should keep, what we should discard, that type of thing. And very important, I think Ms. Stevens or Mr. Dyer mentioned this word, consensus. Right, so we want both SK and NEVIS. We want to see some complementarity, in the data, it complementing each other, and also consensus with those questions. Right, so yes, this process continues, and let's say kudos to the disaster management organizations that they have built in a component for the consultant to sit one-on-one with the stakeholders after Friday. Right, so we will have a heavy schedule sitting down with them and getting, yes, we will be filling out the questionnaires, but I'm sure, stakeholders will begin to engage us in the process. So we'll be meeting one-on-one with them.
Sounds great. I don't know if I can ask, but from your years of experience in this field, in this area, and your travels through the Caribbean, how far away would you say we are from where you would like to see us, see these disaster agencies get to be more efficient?
Right, that's an excellent question. Of course, I don't have the background data to compare, but I would say, and Ms. Stevens know this, that 5 years ago or 3 to 5 years ago, the audit tool that was used then have significantly improved to now. Right, so whatever the NDMOs got a couple of years ago, it has now increased, right, whereby more improvements will be coming to the Federation. There's always room for improvements, and let me say that we looked at St. Vincent's disaster. And of course, there are improvements that are needed there, and I believe SKN is ahead of the game in terms of really getting buy-in and really taking this process seriously in this time with their busy schedules. And let's see after this, they will need to implement and reform some of the very areas that they've been working in. So change is coming.
Sounds good. And for our two disaster coordinators, what are your expectations? What are you guys hoping that the Nima as well as the NDMD will get at the end of this audit process?
I want to say, first of all, we will gain an open mind to removing the barriers that once was applied to disaster management. Right. Many years ago, when you said NEMA or NDMD, persons thought of one hazard, hurricane. We were a hurricane-centric office, but we've come such a long way. And I was very pleased to hear Ms. Murray say in her sentiments that we are a ways ahead. We're not where we need to be, but we are on our way. And in disaster, I believe that we are ever evolving, because when we were paying attention to hurricanes, we started seeing more frequency in the occurrence of seismic-related activities, and so you had to zoom in to earthquakes, and earthquakes can trigger other hazards. So you started looking at volcanic eruption, land slippage. We're looking at tsunami, the new buzzword in disaster management. And so we recognized that we had to embrace the comprehensive disaster management mandate where we position ourselves and equip ourselves with the resources and the staff to be able to give attention to a multi-hazard approach. Yeah? And then when you look at the disaster offices, we don't have more than 15 staff on any island. Maybe Brian might have more than 15, but we don't have more than 15. But the responsibility of the disaster offices, it's a huge one. And you see that even with the recent response to the COVID-19 pandemic, everything was surrounding disaster management, Nima or NDMD. And so you recognize that even with the health hazards, we have to give attention and give guidance and support there as well. And so we are doing a lot of work, but we can't do it on our own. That's why we need our stakeholders, we need our committees, we need our volunteers, we need interagency interactions. We need these opportunities to be able to promote what is happening in disaster so that persons know that we are not just sitting there, twiddling our thumbs and forgetting the purpose of why we exist as disaster offices. And so I believe that we are doing a lot of work and we will continue on the path. There are some shortcomings because disaster should have specialized staff, specific training and certifications. Right now we tap into the various departments and ministries and offices that have access to these resources, but rightfully we should have it at our fingertips. And so we are doing a lot of work in building our own capacity to be able to respond in quick time, having access to the resources on our compound, etc. So I would say that we are on our way, and a lot of what we require comes with a cost, and I'm talking about the dollar cost, and we also have to factor that into how we move progressively to where we need to go. I don't know if Brian wants to add anything.
Well, as you indicated, disaster management has evolved since I have been in disaster management, and the workload also has increased. The responsibility of the officers of the office has also increased, and we now have to be more evidence-based to engender support from the international agencies, and we also have to ensure that our standards meet their standards as well. So it's a measuring tool, and the stakeholders would help us in that regard, coming with frank, open minds to criticize our operations and the framework and identify areas where we could enhance to ensure that we meet not only the requirements of our parent organization, Nima, but also the international agencies who usually have to come to the rescue of the region in the event that our system is overwhelmed. And in that regard, we should come out a lot better than we are currently.
I assume Ms. Murray will be presenting a report to the agencies at the end of this process. So my question is, how do we ensure that this report doesn't sit on a shelf somewhere, that these policies or these recommendations, or what they may be, are implemented and pushed forward for the betterment of the disaster agencies here? I think Ms. Murray will be producing two reports, one to summarize the audit tool and then a final country report. From the country report, or the data gathered from the audit, we will be, the offices, we will look at the recommendations derived from the report, and also we start compiling our country work program. So the recommendations from the report would be explained in our country work program in the form of training, acquisition of equipment, specialized area that is required in offices, such as the GIS, which is a requirement now for developing our hazard mapping and for doing impact-based forecasts, that kind of thing. So we look forward to the information generated from the audit so we can enhance our work program for the next 5 to 10 years. I thought Mrs. Langley-Stevens had input. As we wrap up this portion of today's program, I would ask you guys if you have any final words, to encourage your stakeholders, your partners, to be enthusiastic, to be more enthusiastic, I should say, about this initiative, and just give the support that you guys are asking for.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for this opportunity to be on working with you and to talk to your viewers about this very important event. And thereafter, I think I want to pick up on what Ms. Stevens said earlier, that every day is a good volunteer day, and every day we need to engage our stakeholder. So it's just not a one-time event, and I'm sure other donor organizations will be coming through, but like you said earlier, it's imperative on every organization to improve, to take that information and to keep moving on in improving where they were yesterday to today. So yes, every day is a good volunteer day, and stakeholders stay close, and so that we both can engage each other in the work for the better of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Well, I'd just like to appeal to our stakeholders. I know the office would have been calling you for the last couple of days, and to ensure that you join us tomorrow at the Nevis Performing Arts Center at 9 a.m. We will have you there for 2 hours while we engage you with the CDM audit tool. And I want to thank you again for your participation. And do come out and support the event. And we will look forward to engaging you on one-on-one sessions with Ms. Murray as we do try to enhance the disaster management framework to protect our citizens here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
So I'm going to start by issuing the vote of thanks on behalf of Nima. I believe that it is of great value when we can come together at the local and the regional level to be able to share information with the country on a whole. So I really want to thank Brian for taking time out of what I know to be his busy schedule to journey down to have this conversation with us. Brian is always a willing participant, and he carries the mantle of the Nevis disaster management with pride. And so, Brian, I want to thank you for accepting our invitation to join us here on this particular discussion. Ms. Murray, I want to thank you for continuing the level of enthusiasm and the knowledge that you have and your experience, and imparting that on both disaster offices to be able to empower staff so that we, when we face the stakeholders, we are speaking from, singing from the same hymn sheet. I think that is very important as we advance. Additionally, I really want to thank the stakeholders on St. Kitts in particular who would have registered already and signaled their interest in participating in this historic, critical, and timely exercise. I have been exposed to the tool. I have been working with Ms. Murray and the team at Nima over the last few weeks, and I believe that having gone through the first audit a few years ago and now looking at this particular audit, I can say that when we receive the end product, and that is the information that we are going to get from our stakeholders, we can build a better product. There's always room for improvement, and in disaster management, we are no different. We welcome the good words, we welcome the constructive criticism, we welcome the recommendations, and Thursday in Nevis and Friday here in St. Kitts at the Marriott are excellent jump-off points for us to start the process and to be able to move on the road to getting us a report. And no, it won't gather dust on a shelf, because it is something that we need to continue to benefit from the external world in terms of the external partners that we work with and benefit from. So we have work to do with this particular document and the outcomes and the recommendations that we can look forward to implementing. So thank you, Mr. Johnson, for the opportunity to be here.
And I will end by thanking you, all three of you, for joining us here and working for you. We will be taking a short break as we welcome several more guests, and this time we will be speaking about the upcoming Caribbean Wave exercise. Stay tuned.
Once we're vaccinated, and everybody gon' be safe. Everybody gon' be safe. One kind, one people. We are roll up to roll up, yeah. Cause no man's alone. Do what's right, alright. Cause I love you, brother, my sister. And we're in this together, my sister, my brother. I love you too much. I think it's better for us, yeah, yeah. It's better for us, yeah. I don't wanna lose you. I love you too much, yeah, yeah. It's better for us. Tell your mommy to let it roll out.
Bless up, Dejo here, and I'm doing my part in the fight against COVID-19 by following all safety protocols and, most importantly, rolling up my sleeve for the vaccine. So I'm encouraging you to do the same, because that's our best shot of protecting ourselves, our family, and our friends. So don't wait, vaccinate. Let's roll up to roll out.
I will take the vaccine because building defenses against COVID-19 is a team effort, and we are all a key part of that defense.
I definitely will be taking the vaccine when it's my turn.
I will be taking the vaccine as it is an important tool in the fight against the pandemic.
It is important for me to vaccinate to ensure that if I do become infected with the disease, it can prevent hospitalization. In addition, it also helps with herd immunity.
I will take the vaccine to protect myself, my loved ones, my clients, my co-workers, my community.
St. Kitts and Nevis, why do we need to vaccinate? Kenisha? So we can jab COVID-19 away.
I am Jonathan Powell, Minister of Education for St. Kitts and Nevis, and I'm asking all staff within our educational institutions to go out and be vaccinated against the COVID-19 virus. Whether you're a teacher or teaching assistant, a librarian or security officer, you may drive a school bus or work at school meals. In addition to the non-pharmaceutical protocols of mask wearing, washing our hands, and keeping our distance, we all have a duty to go out and be vaccinated. As we speak, our schools have been closed prematurely because of a recent upsurge in positive COVID-19 cases in our communities. As a matter of fact, our federation is currently in a form of lockdown as a result. We all have to go out and protect not just ourselves, but protect our students who are unable to be vaccinated and protect themselves. Teachers, bus drivers, security officers, kitchens and divisions. Let's roll up so that we can roll out in September.
Program of this edition of Working for You. As promised, we are joined by two new guests. We have with us now Mrs. Owika Lennon-Petty, Planning Officer at Nima, and also the lead person here in St. Kitts and Nevis for Caribbean Wave Exercise. And we're also joined by Superintendent Lyndon David, Tsunami Warning Focal Point. A recurring face is Mrs. Clarissa Langley-Stevens, Deputy National Disaster Coordinator, who will be just here to provide some additional support and feedback to her team. Welcome to the Two New Faces to the program, and thanks for joining us. Okay, so I'm pretty sure many persons out there have heard the term Carib wave before, but for those who may not know, what exactly is the Carib wave exercise?
Wave is a regional-based tsunami exercise. It's usually done in March. And basically, Caribbean wave is used to test the early warning systems of the Caribbean region. Because, you know, in the Caribbean region, because we are surrounded by water, and tsunami being a water-based hazard, then we are vulnerable. And so each year, the National Emergency Management Agency, along with the NEVIS Disaster Management Department, participates in Caribbean Wave, and we do so in order to test our local systems as well as the receival of the tsunami warning messages from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center.
Great. But one may ask, why are we even participating in a tsunami exercise? I mean, yes, we are, as you rightly mentioned, we are surrounded by water, but, you know, some may ask, why are we even participating in this? And what would you tell that person who asks such a question?
Well, I would tell them, as you just said, we are surrounded by water. And so the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center some years ago would have said that the Caribbean region is actually overdue for a tsunami. So it's not an if, it's a when. And so because we subscribe to comprehensive disaster management at the agencies, we strive to prepare ourselves for any impact, and that includes the impact of a tsunami.
Mrs. Langley-Stevens hinted to that earlier, earlier in the program, where she said, at first people just heard Nima and think just hurricane, but we have advanced to the point where you guys encompass all disasters. Okay, so what happens during these exercises?
Well, in a nutshell, we've evolved over the years in terms of how we exercise in Caribbean Wave, participate in Caribbean Wave. Originally, what we did, we concentrated on the physical evacuation exercises, and that would enable us to test the emergency responders, because, you know, those are the first ones on the ground, one in the public using their sirens to evacuate persons. So we usually use that opportunity to test that aspect, as well as public awareness, public education in terms of, you know, the knowledge of where your assembly point is in the given area, not just where you live, but where you work and play. Because of COVID-19, just like with everything else, it has caused us to revisit the drawing board in terms of how we go about doing things, which is actually, in this case, a good thing, because new ideas enable us to test new areas of our emergency response. And so in 2020, when COVID-19 was, you know, just getting on the rise in the region, Caribbean Wave became a communication exercise. And then in 2021, what we did, instead of doing the physical evacuation exercise, because at the time, mass gatherings was still discouraged. So what we did a communications exercise where we had Flow and Digicel send out some SMS test messages. We had radio as well doing some tsunami warning test messages, and we had a social media as well. And what we had was persons calling Nima or using our WhatsApp number saying that we received the message at such and such time, because we wanted to know how our reach is to the public and, you know, how fast the public receives these messages. And we also did virtual tabletop exercises last year with the stakeholders. This year now, we've decided to add on, to use our new way of doing things and to add it to our old way with adjustments. What I mean by that is, So for this year, we will be replicating a communication exercise. However, we will be testing the early warning system, that is our emergency broadcast interrupter system that we are currently working to get in on stream. We have 3 of them, and so what we want to do, because the emergency interrupter comes with a sound, so when it interrupts the regular programming of a radio station, you'll hear a warning sound. So we want to test that sound. We want to get the feedback from the general public in terms of how effective is that sound in getting your attention. Because, you know, the most important thing of an emergency sound is to get the attention of the general public so that they can receive the appropriate warning, whether it is to evacuate or what have you. And so we want to test that sound, and that will be on March 10th, the day of Caribbean Wave. I won't tell you the time and I won't tell you the radio stations, because one of the things about Caribbean Wave that we do is we try to keep parts of the information, you know, a little secret, so that we don't want you to wait and sit down with your hands folded at, say, 7 o'clock in the morning waiting for a sound to see if you hear it. No. We want to do it when you are going about your regular business, so you don't expect it, because that's what we want. We want as realistic as possible the reactions of the general public.
Test for you guys, it's also an exercise for us, the general public. Okay.
How you react and how effective the way that we alert the public is, because, you know, in emergency, the most important thing is time. And with tsunamis, you don't have much time. And so we will be gathering feedback from the general public via electronic surveys, as well as the volunteers will also be going out in their different districts, collecting information and having conversations with community members. We'll also be reintroducing our physical evacuation exercise. However, as opposed to doing it in the day, because we have replicated it during daytime, during working hours, we are going to do it at night, because we want to see how it is at night, because tsunamis don't have a time. They don't have an 8 to 4 job. They have a 24/7, just like that. So we want to see how it will go in the night, because things do look different in the night. And so we'll be exercising in District 4. I won't announce the date, but it will be in March. And District 4 would be from Old Road to New Guinea area. And we chose that area as one of the more vulnerable rural communities. We will also, after that, we will also be organizing some walk to your assembly points in the different districts, and this will be led by the Nima district volunteers. So we also want to promote assembly point knowledge. Where are your assembly points? Do you live in a tsunami hazard zone? And so we will be using this as a way to educate the public, and as a way for the volunteers to have community engagement with their different community members. Because, you know, our volunteers, when we have evacuation orders and stuff like that, our volunteers are one of the arms of disaster management that we'll be depending on to assist. And so we want to give them that opportunity to practice what they have been trained to do. And then we'll also be doing the 4th installation of our tsunami wall murals. I don't know if you've seen them. Well, currently we have 3 of them, one in Virchels. Okay, he's thinking. One in Virchels, one in Keon, and then one in Charlestown, Nevis. And so we'll be doing a 4th one in the Bastille area. These wall murals, each of them depict a different message. What we do is we cater it to the community, whatever cultural aspect of the community. And so you would find in Keon, we have Green Valley, the farmers. In Virtuals, you have the stones. You have a fisherwoman, actually, as well as athletes. And then the one in Charlestown, Nevis, you have some students, because it's next to the Charlestown High School, as well as some drummers. So we try to do a cultural component of whichever community, and that in itself leads to the community itself, ownership. Because when we were actually painting a mural in Keon, one of the community members actually stopped and he looked at the farmer and said, "That's me. I see me in that." So we want them to see the message and own the message.
Superintendent David, how does the security forces fit into this whole exercise?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Those of you who are listening and watching on the various media platforms. Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here to share information in partnership with Nima and being also an integral part of Nima as well, unofficially. Clarissa says she's going to hijack me sometime. So, well, it is. But the tsunami warning focal point is at the Bar State Police Station, our police headquarters, and that is where our telecommunications office is. In a nutshell, what it is a department that is open 24 hours, and you have the necessary communication devices to communicate the necessary information that will be coming in from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. And in these exercises, whenever we receive the information at the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, there's a few things that have to happen. But before I go to that, I just want to say exactly what a tsunami warning focal point is, as described by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. It says it's an designated official or point of contact, primarily or alternate, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to receive tsunami or other coastal hazard-related information bulletins and warning guidance. The Tsunami Warning Focal Point has the responsibility of notifying the emergency authority, civil defense, or other designated agencies responsible for public safety of the event characteristics, say earthquake and/or tsunami, in accordance with the procedures of the Tsunami Response Plan. The Tsunami Warning Focal Point receives tsunami advisory information from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center or other regional warning centers. And in time soon we may have the Caribbean Tsunami Warning Center that will also assist in that regard. So whenever the messages are received, first we look at a few things. We have to look at the magnitude of the quake, and anything that is 6.5 in magnitude, especially in shallow waters and nearby to us, it is likely to trigger a tsunami. If it is in deep water, well, we may not have a tsunami. We may have a disturbance in the waves, but may not be destructive waves. But if it is greater than that, well, we know what can happen. So once that message is received, they analyze it. We look at the magnitude, as I said, the location, and then we also look to see if St. Kitts and Nevis are in the category. So we have the wave heights. So if we're in 3 meters or more, well, we know we have to be prepared. 1 meter to 3 meters, there might be some disturbances. Below 1 meter, well, we may not have anything to look about. But the message will be sent to the Nima, we have our Assistant Commissioner of Operations, the Division Officers, Fire and Rescue, and we also have the Defense Force, and then we have media houses, just to test and so forth. But in a real event, they will actually get it. But Nima will be responsible for ensuring a number of things where that is concerned. In terms of warning, I just want to say we have 2 types of warning. This one here is critical, the natural warning. Some people will say, but what if we don't have time? So I want to tell you, if you do not have time, because it's a local tsunami, happened just out there, maybe in Roadstead by a state, just outside the road in shallow waters. It is said that once the earth shakes for a long time, you see buildings falling down and so forth. Don't wait. Then you also see a sudden change in the ocean. You might see the water recede. Or you see you hear a sudden roaring sound in the water. It's time for you to head to higher grounds. These are just a natural warning. So do not wait for us to tell you anything. You need to get to higher ground. Water receding, unusual. I think recently in one of the Asian countries, there was a tsunami. And people look at the strange phenomena, the water going back, fish on the ocean floor there, and people went towards it. And then in some seconds, the waves just came up with a massive force, right? And kill a lot of people. So we're saying, do not look at this strange activity. It's unusual, do not want to be newsy. Get to higher ground once you realize it's the ocean moving backwards. It will come back shortly thereafter. Then we have the other warning, which is the official warning from the police, Nima. Currently, we do not have a loud hailer, an alarm system that we go throughout. I know when sugar was once king, you could stay some distance and you know when it's lunchtime, crap start, crap out, that horn, you know what I mean? I don't know what they do with it, but I think we should try to get it back or something similar. However, that is not there, so we are saying that at police headquarters and fire stations, we have our various alarm systems, so to inform our officers, and some of them are so loud that the neighbors around those buildings can hear it. However, in time of this, we'll have the police and the fire and defense force, we have our sirens and our PA systems and our devices. The areas that are prone to the destructive waves, will be in those areas and advising persons to leave, head to higher grounds. It is important that everybody know where the assembled areas are, the safe zones, so they can go to those areas in higher ground. But if you do not know, you will not be wrong if you go to higher ground. But what we're saying to you, make sure you know your way back down, because there will be another search and rescue to locate you, you know. So we are saying that persons really need to pay attention, and this exercise that we've been doing over the years, they're very instrumental for preparedness. And we know that there are a number of persons are familiar with it, in particular the school children, you know, and we, you know, sometimes when you want with the adults and things, just tell this child, mommy, daddy, teacher say, I heard this on the TV. So these are the things we're using to assist us. And finally, just to say that we will, once we have the necessary information, we can issue a warning, we can issue an advisory, and there can be a watch, you know, and these are the things that will be issued from time to time, and they will also come to, as I heard Ms. Petty spoke earlier, regarding the media houses, they can also come to those things as well. So therefore, we are saying to persons, we want you to learn as much as possible regarding the natural warning of a tsunami, respond to the pleadings of the police, the fire, and the defense force for persons to head to higher ground, because we might be impacted within the next 10 minutes. But I prefer that if we're going to be impacted, it will be a long time, like half an hour and an hour, so we can prepare very good, as opposed to one that happened nearby. And as was said earlier by Mrs. Clarissa Langley Stephen and Mr. Petty, is that it is said that the Caribbean is due a major earthquake with a tsunami. Yes, we have seen major earthquake in the Caribbean, Haiti, but those earthquakes happened inland, so there was no tsunami. But if it happened in the ocean, in particular shallow water, definitely. So if it happened open waters, the water will come in, but as it reaches to shallow water, then it starts to build up. That's the destruction. And basically, the tsunami is just a series of waves that will just continue to come and cause destruction. And we want persons to realize that it is very important that you practice. Don't say, oh, I got to go for my phone. I have to go for, once you hear leave. You can all time get those back, but your life, that's a different story in itself.
I'm pretty sure some of you may have received these messages sometime, you know, we feel a shake. You feel it. And so in those times, you're saying to people, don't just WhatsApp, update your WhatsApp, feel it, act.
We don't mind you feel it, but you don't have time to ask if you felt it. Move. As long as you understand what is required in terms of a response for tsunami, when you feel it, you start processing. Was it strong? Was it long? Was it hard enough to really make me evacuate? Those are the questions, not if you feel it, you know? So my role is to tell you a very, very short story. And This story started in 2014 when the opportunity coming out of a regional meeting through UNESCO for St. Kitts and Nevis to consider what is referred to as Tsunami Ready recognition. And it's a fancy name, but all it means is that the country would put the necessary response and mitigative measures in place that would allow us to efficiently respond to the threat or the impact and response to a tsunami. Now, I say a short story because we had nothing other than a disaster office. Tsunami was a relatively new phenomenon for us, but we recognized very quickly what Mrs. Petty said, that we are in a vulnerable position geologically, and so we had to make some informed decisions that, you know, this might be very useful for us to be able to position ourselves to benefit from Tsunami Ready. And so we started the discussions in 2014, and we advanced very quickly in getting the buy-in from the government and the support from the regional stakeholders to include the Caribbean Tsunami Information Center based in Barbados. We were able to get support from the UE Seismic Research Center at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago. We were able to get support from University of Puerto Rico, where the UNESCO-based operations occur. And with that support, and I'm talking about support in terms of the resource personnel and the funding that would help St. Kitts and Nevis to benefit from this project. And so the government signed off on it, and we were on our way. It was a lot of work. Ms. Petty would agree with me when I say it's a lot of work, because you were starting from scratch, not having any model, anything to guide you, because St. Kitts and Nevis did the most unique thing in Tsunami Ready is that, unlike other countries, we were doing a twin island federation. So in other countries like Grenada, they isolated the vulnerable communities and they worked with that community to make it Tsunami Ready. We decided, no, that's too much of a long process. We went for island certification. So everything that happened on St. Kitts was happening on Nevis simultaneously. And one of the things that makes, well, the basic thing that makes us Tsunami Ready is to acknowledge that we are vulnerable. Once we acknowledge that we were vulnerable, the external partners, they were very, very helpful in getting us access to the resources, to include signage, education and awareness materials, giving us access to tsunami-based videos. We were able to run an aggressive campaign about tsunami. We were able to conduct training with our key stakeholders, to include police, telecoms, 911, because while we're sleeping, somebody needs to pay attention to what's happening. And so we brought all of these pieces together. And in 2016, November, we were able to gain Tsunami Ready recognition in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was a proud moment for St. Kitts and Nevis. 2014, and finally getting that recognition from the regional entity of the United Nations, that we have done our part in St. Kitts, and we feel comfortable that you are able to respond efficiently enough to a tsunami, which means that our people are a lot safer. The capacity of the disaster offices would have been strengthened, and we have access to the resources. Fast forward to about a month ago, when we went through the process again, because it's a 4-year process, and we went through that process again. This time it was led by Mrs. Aurika Lennon-Petty as our planning officer. The first time I had the honor of doing it, and I really was happy to share the responsibilities with Mrs. Petty, and she did a splendid job in getting us to a place of, yet again, St. Kitts and Nevis received a virtual Tsunami Ready recognition about a month ago. And so we expect that there's going to be a formal indicator or ceremony to solidify that we would have done our part. And I can tell you we've come a long way from 2014, 2016, and now 2022, where you see that we have maps And Mrs. Petty coming as from a background where she's able to bring the planning and the geography and the mapping knowledge with support from physical planning to be able to get us tsunami hazard or inundation maps that we can use as educational tools and for persons to display in their areas, especially if they're in vulnerable tsunami hazard zones. Yeah, we were able to increase on our tsunami-based exercises, the evacuation exercise, the alerting early warning exercises. And then I think one of the things that we could be proudest of is that we now have the technology on island that would allow us to interrupt a broadcast and indicate to the general public listening to that particular station with a sound that should catch your attention, because it's not a sound you hear every day, because not every day we are going to be threatened or impacted, as the case may be. And when you hear that sound, we are saying, know the sound, listen for the sound, understand what it means, and when you hear it, respond. Yeah? And the response we are asking you for is, if you're in a tsunami hazard zone, evacuate where you are, head on a tsunami evacuation route and get to an assembly point where you can get further information. Basic things like, yes, the tsunami is coming, we have 20 minutes, so we want you to go to higher ground, or it was a false alarm, and so you're okay to return to your regular operations. And to have these resources, I believe that the disaster offices, and I'm speaking for both Nima and NDMD, we are so well positioned. And not only well positioned, we have the full support of our stakeholders who are very critical to our ability to respond efficiently and in a timely manner. But a lot of it has to be done through education. We have to educate you. This is what you need to do when that happens. And I like to tell persons that the tsunami-based movies, they're not just movies. They're true stories being enacted. It means that persons and countries would have gone through this. And we're saying, if we had to go through this, let us do it better. Because if we do it better, we are going to save more lives. And when you look at these hazard-based movies, the one thing that stands out is the loss of life. And we are trying to reduce the risk that we could lose so many lives, noting that we have several communities that are hugged by the coastline. And if we can get persons to understand that when this occurs and you hear the sound, or you hear the sirens, or you hear a runner saying tsunami is coming, and you respond appropriately and not go pick up fish in a bucket or put, move to higher grounds, I believe that we would have done a very, very good job.
You mentioned evacuation zones. How do one know that they're in such a zone? Do you guys go out, put up signs? How do a resident of Old Road or someone knows that they're in this zone that's prone to harsh effects?
Well, as Mrs. Stevens would have mentioned, we actually have tsunami evacuation maps, and these can be found on www.nima.kn. And these maps, I actually have one, a small one right here. These maps actually show the inundation zones of both St. Kitts and Nevis, because we do have, for St. Kitts, Nevis, Charlestown, Bastille being our capitals, and currently we are producing ones for each district. So these maps, they indicate where would be inundated or flooded if a tsunami occurs, and this is based on worst case scenario, because we wanted to cover as much ground as possible. And so the maps we have produced, they use a 30-meter inland or 100-foot wave in order to point out or designate the tsunami evacuation zones. And so when you look at the map, if you are in the yellow zone, then you're in a tsunami hazard zone. And so then to complement this, we've identified some assembly points where you can go. Notice I said assembly point, not safe area or safe zone. An assembly point is there for information. Do I need to move further inland? Has the threat passed? Was it just as a precaution? You know, and so it's important to know your assembly points. As Superintendent David said earlier, if you get an evacuation order and you don't know your assembly points, you go to higher ground. Yes, you do that. But now, while I don't want to say I have the time because you don't know when a tsunami is going to come, but now while we are trying to educate you, find out where your assembly point is in your respective area. And notice I say respective area, not where you live, because a tsunami can decide to come during the working hours. It can decide to come when you're even sitting down having dinner at a restaurant. And so it's important to know the entire federation. I didn't say island because we do travel to Nevis, but it's important to know the assembly points and the tsunami hazard zones of the entire federation.
And these maps are being made available to the public and to notable places?
Yes, most definitely. And you can always, persons actually call, they ask us to send an electronic copy, which we happily do. Sometimes they even visit the office for additional hazard material, and we are always happy to help. So there are many avenues.
There are always skeptics out there. So me say, why move? Say it's so small. The water will catch me up the hill still. So, you know, what would you say to, you know, basically encourage people who think this way, that the best chance of saving your life is to get up still? How do you approach these type of situations?
Well,
so many times as an agency, we conduct these response exercises. I can tell you the countless times that the staff and the volunteers and first responders would have been chastised. You're all tying up the traffic. You're all wasting people's time. No tsunami come, you know? And, and I think we pride ourselves on, I would prefer for you to say that we tried. And for whatever reason, we may fail, but it's not because we failed to try. There are skeptics, and we've engaged several. And I think one of the critical things for us at the agency is that we're not going to allow anyone to derail us from the mandate that we have. If we in our planning realize that this particular community is vulnerable, we are going to that community and we are going to execute our operations. And in executing our operations, I mean, Mrs. Petty spoke about the mule. It's the first of its kind. You won't find tsunami mules anywhere else in the world. We were the first to come up with the idea of putting it on a wall, because we use our walls for all sorts of graffiti and all sorts of things. Let's use it for a positive message. And when we started that, I was so happy when we went to Keon. And I really have to commend, you know, the persons in Keon who saw. I mean, we were painting and persons passing and they're honking their horns, you know, looking good. And they're coming and they're asking questions and they're engaging you and, you know, taking that ownership. And that felt good, because if we get one person and that one person go home or go to the bar or go to the barber shop and start having a conversation about tsunami and what they saw, if there are 10 people in that space, we touched 11 people. And that person, somebody else might have a vested interest. And then when they get that message, they're going to take it. So we don't expect to catch everybody at the same time. But we use and diversified our measures of information sharing and education and awareness to be able to capture persons. And when you meet people at their level is when you get them at their best. Because the farmer came in to say, when he came to us, he wasn't even wearing shoes. He was barefooted, and he really explained how he fit into the scheme of things, and he really liked the idea. And our thing was, take the message. Don't leave it on the wall, take it off. And you know, you see the painting on the wall down there, you know what it means, do you understand? Because we took the time to have conversations with persons who show interest in it. We might not get everybody, but the few that we will get they have families. They work in offices and institutions. And so we want to catch the community level. We want to catch the professionals. We want to catch the visitors when they come, because these are excellent tools for visitors to have in their wallet going around. You know, instead of a St. Kitts map with Brimstone Hill only, we have a map now that says, okay, Brimstone Hill is there, but here is also an assembly point. So it's a multi-purpose tool. And it has a lot of information, not just the map, because on the back of it speaks to the level that David just spoke about, the warning, the advisories, you know, the watches. So it's a really, really informative tool. And we also learn, if you want to get the attention of people, especially parents, give the message to the children. And so Nima partners with Ministry of Education through school safety, and we ensure that we exercise the schools on a regular basis. So our students know where the assembly points are. They know how to get to the assembly points. They know what to do in the event of an earthquake, which might be the predetermined hazard to trigger a tsunami. They know all too well. And when Mrs. Petty and I go out to make presentations and you ask the simple question, how long do you think it should take for you to evacuate your facility? Boy, you get 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, and I'm like, no, a minute. You have to get out of here in under a minute. But you can't do that if you do not practice and exercise. And you won't know that if we don't educate you. And so the agency, we are doing a lot of work in this area. We know we have work to do because you won't get everybody at the same time, but continuous effort and being resilient in our efforts, I think we are going to get there. And persons will truly value the purpose of these exercises. Even just this conversation that we are having, to those who are listening, they will take away something.
I really hope that they do. And with that, you guys really did impart some really powerful messages, especially that part about it's not if, it's when. I really think that will stick with a lot of people and encourage them now to go out and learn more about how to protect themselves and their families. So I want to thank you guys for that. Of course, I will give you guys the opportunity now to, you know, say your parting words to our viewers and our listeners out there. We can start with you, Superintendent.
I just want to let persons know that pay attention to what I said about the natural warning. But we just want you to not every time you feel an earthquake that you run up the hills. The exercise is good, yes, and the understanding of the importance is good, but not every earthquake you would want to do that. Remember the natural warning, long-lasting heavy shaking, you know, and you might see buildings falling down, the earth opening up. Once it happens in the ocean, shallow waters, there will be a tsunami coming. If you see the water receding and you're on the coastline or the shore, get away from there, head to higher ground. If you hear the ocean making a roaring noise, and then they said the animals are our good alarm system. You down there and you see animals up and down the place, birds flying and so forth, you have to look and see something. And then we also want persons to realize once we, the police, fire and defense force, coming around and we sign with our PA systems and our sirens on and light flashing, head to higher ground, a tsunami is going to come in the next 15 minutes. We want persons to respond. Do not look for the TV. Take old granny, old grandma, grandpa, baby, our people who are less able to defend themselves or help themselves. You know, those persons in wheelchair, bedridden. We try to get them out of the way and so forth. And once we do that, we see that many lives will be saved. And I like to tell people, a tsunami is not like when a man go down the road and take a gun and shoot one or two persons. A tsunami can wipe out an entire community. Our island, it can wipe it out. So we want persons to take it serious and just educate yourself. Go on the internet, educate yourself, and I think you do very well.
Next. I think Superintendent Dave covered most of what I would have liked to say. I'll just add to that and say that to the general public, when Nima or NDMD, when you hear that evacuation message, that respond to this message to see, did you hear it? Did you feel it? Just respond, basically. I mean, the information that we collect, the reason why we do these exercises is to improve upon our disaster management mechanisms And when we improve upon them, it is only to the benefit of you guys. And so we just want that support so that we can ensure that we cover all areas. Because one of the things that I actually like about exercises is that they identify gaps. And when they identify gaps, we are able to address that gap, go back to the drawing board, and then we practice again. And if we identify another gap, back to the drawing board again until I'm not going to say perfect it, because as they say, nothing can be perfect, but until we reach to near perfection.
In 2019, in a period of 24 hours, St. Kitts and Nevis experienced over 50 earthquakes. I like that. Wow. That was the exact response. Some we felt, some we didn't. And that's the case on a daily basis. It is the responsibility of Nima and NDMD on Nevis to be able to have access to the resources that can inform us even of the silent occurrences that would allow us to get the attention of either the practitioners, first responders, volunteers, government representative, stakeholders, the media. We have that responsibility. It means that we are charged and we answer that charge, but we need you to respond to us, as indicated to Mrs. Petty. So all of our initiatives, they are driven by results. All of our initiatives are observed and evaluated so that where improvements can be made, we make those improvements. Earthquakes occur on a daily basis, but a tsunami can strike us once, and it only takes one time. After that once, what happens is entirely up to how well we did the preparation and the mitigation components of the disaster management cycle. And remember that there's preparedness, there is response after an impact, there is recovery, and there's mitigation, where you do the things you can to reduce the risk of being impacted severely. On that note, I want to use the opportunity to thank persons for their cooperation over the years with the agency. I want you to thank you for sharing your concerns, and I want to encourage you to continue to listen to the voice of Nima as the government agency with responsibility of getting us as a federation from danger to safety. We take our roles very seriously. We understand the importance of our messaging, and we look forward to working with any and all entities who are willing to listen to the message of the agency and in turn act responsibly and within a timely manner. Thank you so much, Kailani.
Thank you. Let me add my own thanks. Thanks to you, Mrs. Clarissa, Mrs. Petty, and of course to you, Superintendent David, for joining us here and working for you and sharing this very, very important information about tsunami and of course about the Caribe 2022 tsunami exercise. Thanks also to you, our viewers and listeners, for joining us. See you next time.
The Audit folks, another edition of Working for You here on WINNMedia Family 98.9. We now head back to our regular program, and don't forget, up next we got Conscious Business.